Wednesday, March 14th. So much has changed since I last wrote. So much. I don't know where to start. It's unbelievable. Maybe when I write it all down, it'll make some sense. I'll start at the beginning. Tuesday morning, just gone 8 o'clock. The coldest day yet. I'm lying on the floor, too cold to sleep, but too cold to get up. My stomach hurts. I raise my head and look around. Jenny's bed is empty. I don't know where she is. I suppose she's in the bathroom, or maybe the kitchen. We still have a few tea bags left. She's probably making a nice hot drink. I rest my head on the pillow and imagine cupping the tea in my hands, breathing in the steam, sipping the hot liquid. And then the door opens and Jenny comes in, tealess and agitated. "Get up, Linus," she says. "Quick, get up." "Oh, what? Come on, hurry." Her face is white and her eyes are shocked. I sit up. "What's the matter, Jen? What is it?" "Anya," she says, and her voice breaks into breathy sobs. "I don't know. Fred said she's..." I got out of bed and put my arms around her. "Hey, come on, it's all right." "No, it's not." "What's the matter? Tell me, Jenny, what is it?" She can't speak. She's too upset. She can't stop crying. I hold her for a while, then gently sit her down. "All right," I say. "You stay here, okay? I'll go and see what's happening. I won't be a minute." I leave the room and shut the door. Down the corridor outside Anya's room, Fred and Russell are talking quietly. As I approach them, they stop talking. "What's going on?" I ask them. They look at me with grim faces. Fred says, "Where's Jenny?" "In my room." He nods, then elbows Anya's door open. "You better take a look." I go inside. Anya is lying face up on the bed, naked. Her throat is tinged with heavy bruising, and her face is discolored and swollen. She's dead. Strangled. "Shit," I say. Fred and Russell come in and stand beside me. Fred says, "I found her like that about 10 minutes ago." I look around the room. It's a mess. Sheets and pillows on the floor, dirty clothes all over the place, the bedside cabinet knocked over. I shake my head, too numbed to know how I feel. Russell puts his hand on my shoulder. It feels as light as a feather. "Where's Bird?" I say. "Here." I turn around. Bird is standing in the doorway. He's barefoot and dressed in his suit. Underneath the suit, he has a sheet wrapped around his chest. His head is tilted stiffly to one side, almost resting on his shoulder. He's staring past me at Anya's body, his eyes full of nothing. I look questioningly to Fred. "What happened?" He scratches his head and sniffs. "I don't know. I was up until 6 this morning. Didn't see anything. Didn't hear anything." "Then what? After 6? "I don't know. I fell asleep." I look to Bird. "Did you do this?" He doesn't answer me. "Hey, Bird." He blinks and looks at me. "Did you kill her?" "Did I what?" "Did you kill Anya?" "Me?" "Yes, you." He cricks his neck and twists his mouth into an unnatural smile. "Why would I kill her? She loved me." He grins, staring at me. "And besides, it's not me who's got a propensity for violence, is it? I mean, who's the street-fighting man around here, huh? Is it me?" He shakes his head. "I don't think so. Do you?" "I don't think it's me that goes round..." Fred steps forward and hits him hard in the belly. Bird groans and sinks to the floor. Next thing, we tie his hands with a belt. Then me and Fred wrap Anya's body in a sheet and drag it out to the lift. It's about 8:30 now. The lift isn't down yet, so we leave the body by the door. Fred grabs hold of Bird, and we go down the corridor and gather at the table. Bird is clammed up now, hasn't said a word since Fred hit him. His mouth is clamped shut, and his jaw clenched tight. His face is alive with twitches. His skin is trembling. "You know," Russell says, "he probably didn't know what he was doing. In the state he's in, he's not really accountable for his actions." "So what?" says Fred. Russell shrugs. I was merely saying, well, don't. Russell looks like a living dead man. Colorless, frail, spiritless. There's nothing left of him. What are we going to do? I say. No one answers. I look at Bird, then at Russell. How long has he got? Who? Bird. How long has he got? I don't know, Russell says. I'm not a doctor. I don't even know what's the matter with him. You said he was infected. No, I said as long as he doesn't get infected, he should be okay. But he's not okay, is he? He's sick and crazy. I wouldn't say that exactly. He may be suffering from some kind of personality disorder. His symptoms may be exacerbated by the pain and infection of the wound. I wish you'd shut up, says Fred. We all lapse into silence. At this point, I'm still trying to get my head round what's going on. I don't understand it all. The cold shock of death, the strange aftermath, full of confusion. And as I'm thinking about it, something really strange starts happening to me. I suddenly find myself, or some weird part of myself, floating up out of my body. Up, up, up. And when I get to the ceiling, I kind of twist around. And then I'm looking down at the scene below. I'm looking down at 4 tattered figures slumped round a table. 4 barely human beings, all dirty and tired, with sunken eyes and sick-looking skin. I see a big man with thick brown hair and a raggedy beard. I see a skeletal old black man, his skin hanging loosely off his frame. I see a bloated man with his hands tied together, dressed in a lunatic suit, all crazy and twisted. And I see a boy, a pathetic-looking thing with ropey hair and junky skin and the baggiest clothes in the world. And I think to myself, what are these people doing? Well, says a voice in my head, 3 of them are discussing the presumed act of the 4th. 3 of them, a villainous drug addict, a dying man, and a vagrant kid, are discussing what to do about a purple-skinned fat man who they assume has murdered a rather distasteful woman. And with that thought, I float back down into my body, just in time to realize that we're all just sitting there, so wrapped up in our own futility that we haven't noticed Jenny coming out of my room and crossing over to the lift. We haven't done anything to prevent her from seeing the sheet-wrapped corpse on the floor. And I hate myself for that. I don't hate myself for much, but I hate myself for that. We're all just sitting there, lost in our own sick heads, and poor Jenny's standing alone with a dead body under a sheet. And then the lift comes down. Gdunk. Clunk. Click. Gdunk. I get up and go out into the corridor, and my heart stops at the sight of Jenny stepping into the lift. She stoops down, picks something up, and steps out again, holding a piece of paper. She reads it, looks up, looks over at me, smiles awkwardly, then glances at the shape under the sheet, comes over to me, and hands me the sheet of paper. I see printed words. I look at Jenny. Are you all right? She nods. Sure? She nods again. I smile at her, then read the note. It says, Lies, my truth. Linus slayed the lady. I read it again, and again, and again, and all I can think is, what? What? And then my brain kicks in, and I think, shit, what am I going to do with this? Tear it up, screw it into a ball, and eat it? Or do I put my trust in the others? Russell, Fred, Jenny? Do I have enough faith in them to trust me? Do they have faith in me? Do they trust me? Of course they do. Jenny follows me back to the table. We sit down, and I pass the note to Russell. He reads it, looks at me, then passes the note to Fred. Fred reads it, looks at me, throws the note on the table. Well, I say to no one in particular. Well, what? Says Fred. What do you think? About what? The note, for Christ's sake. What do you think? What do you think I think? I shake my head. He says, it's bollocks. Bullshit. You should be ashamed of yourself for even asking. A tingle rises in my throat. But then Russell says, now, hold on a minute. And that's when he starts jabbering on about stuff. Justice, guilt, truth, innocence. The need for objectivity. At first, I just assume there's nothing to it. He's just rambling. He's confused, sick. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We mustn't jump to conclusions, he says. We have to listen to all sides of the argument. We have to lay aside our emotions and limit ourselves to the facts. And we have to consider the words of a witness. Even if we mistrust his intentions, we have a duty to consider his testimony. What witness? Fred says. What are you talking about? Russell says nothing. He just looks up slowly and points at the ceiling. Fred frowns, not getting it. I still don't get it either, but then a worrying thought suddenly creeps into my head. I look down at the note on the table. Lies my truth. Linus slayed the lady. Is this what you're talking about? I ask Russell, picking up the note. Is this what you mean by the words of a witness? Russell just looks at me, and it's clear from his silence that I'm right. Oh, for God's sake, Fred snorts, suddenly getting it. He glares at Russell. You are joking, aren't you? I've never been more serious in my life, Russell says. Fred snorts again, shaking his head in disbelief. Russell goes on. Look, I'm not saying we have to believe his testimony. Fred laughs dismissively. Russell remains calm. Who else apart from the killer saw what happened? Fred shakes his head again. This is ridiculous. Linus didn't kill Anya for Christ's sake. I'm not saying he did. All I'm saying is, as Russell and Fred carry on arguing and Jenny slips off quietly to my room, I just sit there in silence, too miserable and bewildered to do anything. I know that Russell's lost his mind, and I know he doesn't know what he's doing, but that doesn't make it any easier to accept. He's doubting me. Sick or not, he's doubting me. And that hurts. So I just sit there, not really listening to him anymore, just trying to empty myself of all the bad stuff I'm feeling. And then another thought creeps into my head, a questioning voice that says, maybe he does know what he's doing. Or at least, he thinks he does. Maybe he thinks he's trying to help you. And then I start thinking about the other note, the killing note. Listen, my word, he who kills another shall be free. And I remember when Russell tried to persuade me to go along with it. All you have to do, he told me, is kill me or Bird, or both of us if you want, and he'll let you go. And now I'm thinking that maybe the reason Russell is trying to convince Fred and the man upstairs that I killed Anya is because he thinks it'll get me out of here. In his twisted state of mind, he actually believes that Anya's killer would be free, and he thinks, in his madness, that if he can persuade both Fred and the man upstairs that I'm the murderer, the man upstairs will let me go. But of course, the man upstairs knows it wasn't me. He sees everything. He knows everything. He is the only witness. And he's not going to let anyone go anyway. But Russell can't see that. His brain is all messed up. His reasoning is gone. He's lost it. But I don't want to say that. I don't want to say to Fred, hey, don't listen to this crazy old man. He's sick in the head. His brain is mangled. No, I don't want to say that. It wouldn't be right. So I just sit there, not hurting quite so much anymore, and wait for Russell to talk himself out. After a long 20 minutes or so, he begins to lose track of what he's saying. His twisted logic becomes even more twisted. He starts getting really confused, mumbling, muttering, rambling incoherently, and eventually he ends up just sitting there, staring at the table, his mouth hanging open and his poor face lost in bewilderment. I'll take him back to his room, I tell Fred. Fred nods. I take Russell back to his room, get him into bed, then go back to the table. What's the matter with him? Fred asks me. I tell him about Russell's brain tumor. He knows I didn't kill Anya, I explained. He's just got this mixed-up idea that if the man upstairs believes I killed her, he'll let me go. Fred nods. Kinda guessed that. I sigh. Bird makes a horrible rasping sound then, hawking up something from the back of his throat. Me and Fred both look at him. He stares straight ahead, his left eye twitching. What the hell are we going to do with him? I ask Fred. Fred says nothing. He just shakes his head. We couldn't decide what to do with Bird. We secured him in his room, tying him to the bed. And then we just sat down and talked things over for hours and hours, trying to work out what to do. We didn't know why Bird had killed Anya, or whether he'd known what he was doing or not. And as Fred pointed out, we didn't even know for sure he had killed her. We're only guessing it was him, he said. Who else could have done it? Russell. I stared at Fred. He shrugged. It's possible, isn't it? He's not himself anymore. He's half crazy. He could have done it. No, I said, shaking my head. No way. Fred shrugged again. You don't know that. Yeah, I do. Fred was right, of course. I didn't know that Russell hadn't killed Anya. I was 99% sure that he hadn't. And I think Fred felt the same. But we couldn't discount the possibility. So then we had to try to work out what to do about that as well. We didn't get very far. How could we prove that Bert had done it, or that Russell had done it? And even if we could prove anything, what did we do then? Put the killer on trial? Punish him? Lock him up? He was already locked up. We all were. In the end, we got to the stage where we just couldn't think about it anymore. We were too tired, too confused to carry on. It was early evening by then, and we'd been talking all day. We decided to leave it at that for now, get some rest, start again tomorrow. It happened in the early hours of the morning. I was asleep in my room with Jenny. Fred was outside in the corridor. Bird and Russell were both in their rooms. Bird was still tied up, his belt-bound hands secured to the bed by another belt. But we hadn't done anything to restrain Russell. He was so weak now, he could barely walk. I'd had to help him to the bathroom earlier on. He had no idea where he was or what he was doing. Besides, Fred was going to spend the night sitting in a chair at the kitchen end of the corridor, so even if Russell did leave his room for any reason, Fred would see him. At least until the lights went out, and then he'd hear them. And I've still got this, Fred said, grinning and clicking one of the cigarette lighters the man had sent down to us a million years ago. Don't worry, Linus, he said, patting my shoulder. Nothing's going to happen. You and Jenny get some sleep, and we'll talk about it again in the morning. I was confused when the sound of the lift woke me up. Gadong, gadonk. It was dark, and it felt early. That wasn't right. The lift comes down at 9 o'clock. The lights are always on at 9 o'clock. The lift doesn't come down when it's dark. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and listened. Whirr, clunk, click. It was definitely the lift. I wasn't dreaming. Jenny was still asleep. I could hear her sleepy breathing. I got up quietly, tiptoed across the pitch-black room, and opened the door. Fred? I whispered into the darkness. A light came on over by the lift, the flickering flame of Fred's cigarette lighter. He was standing in front of the lift door, his head angled to one side, as if he was listening to something. The lift came to a halt. Gadunk, gadunk. The door didn't open. What's going on? I asked Fred, crossing over to him. Listen, he said. I listened. Silence. It's stopped now, Fred said. What stopped? It sounded like a phone ringing. Where, in the lift? He nodded. I could have sworn a phone started ringing. There it is, Fred said. I knew I'd heard it. It was an old-fashioned telephone ring. Bring, 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 bring. I stepped closer to the lift door and listened hard. There was no doubt it was coming from inside the lift. What's he doing? I said. Fred shook his head. God knows. The ringing stopped. Nothing happened for a moment. And then, suddenly, the door opened and the phone started ringing again. We could see it now. It was on the floor at the back of the lift. A cheap-looking mobile with a grubby white casing. The screen was flashing on and off with a bring tone. Bring, 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 bring. What do we do? I said to Fred. Nothing, he said. Just leave it. But it won't be anything, Linus. He's playing games with us again. It's just another... All the lights came on, and a sudden flash of blinding white, and a second later we heard the scream. It came from behind us, from my room, from Jenny. I turned and ran. "Jenny!" I yelled. "Jenny!" My door was half opened. I barged through it and saw Bird bending over the bed, trying to get a hold of Jenny. She was scrabbling away from him, swatting away his hands, her face shocked white and her eyes wide with fear. I threw myself at Bird, got a hold of him round the neck, and started pulling him away. He twisted round and clawed at me like a lunatic, hissing and growling, spitting and snarling. And then, suddenly, Fred was there, grabbing hold of Bird's shoulders, swinging him around and hammering his massive head into his face. Once, crack, and again, crack. Bird went down without a sound. We still haven't worked out exactly what happened. We know that Bird gnawed his way through the belts at some point because we found the chewed remains of them in his room. But the rest of it, we can only guess at. We think the man upstairs must have been watching Bird. Infrared cameras? He must have seen him chewing through the belts, waited until he was almost free, then distracted us with the phone in the lift, so we didn't see Bird sneaking out of his room. Of course, he couldn't have known what Bird was going to do. But it was pretty obvious he was going to do something. And I guess that's all that matters to him. As long as he's got something to watch, he's happy. God knows what Bird was actually doing. Was he after me? Did he know that Jenny was in my room? I don't even want to think about it. Jenny's just about okay now. She was badly shaken up for a while, but after I'd sat with her for an hour or so, telling her over and over again that there was nothing to worry about anymore, that Bird was gone and she'd never see him again, she slowly began to come out of it. "Is he really gone?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Is he dead?" I nodded again. "Did Fred kill him?" "I didn't mean to kill him, Linus." "I know. I thought I just knocked him out. It wasn't until I dragged him out that I realized he was dead." "You did what you had to do, Fred. He was probably just about dead anyways. Not that it matters. As long as Jenny's all right, that's all that counts." I'm getting all mixed up now. I can't remember if I talked to Fred first and then talked to Jenny, or if it was the other way around. All I know for sure is that at some point I was sitting at the table with Fred and Jenny was in my room, and I suddenly realized that while all his craziness had been going on, we hadn't seen or heard anything from Russell. "We'd better go and check on him," I said to Fred. I looked in on Jenny first. She was asleep, all curled up, nice and snug, sucking quietly on a finger. I closed the door and left her to it. Fred followed me down the corridor to Russell's room. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again. Still no answer. I looked at Fred. He shrugged. I opened the door just an inch. "Russell?" Nothing. "Russell?" The silence was ominous. With a heavy heart, I pushed open the door and went inside. For a fraction of a second, everything seemed normal. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, the bed. And then I saw him. He was lying on the bed wrapped in a reddened sheet. The sheet was wet. The red was blood. My legs were shaking as I went over for a closer look. I sank down on the bed, numbed to the bone. A hollow sickness ached in my belly. You know what I thought then? I thought, this is it. This is what happens and what will happen. This is where you're going, Linus. This silence, this stillness, this lack of feeling, this is where you're going. When I looked into Russell's lifeless face, a flood of wretchedness filled my heart. I've never had a feeling like it before. Words can't describe it. Through cold tears, I looked down at the empty socket where his glass eye should have been. Lying on the sheet beside his head was a splinter of colored glass. It took me a moment to get it. Russell Lansing had popped out his glass eye, smashed it on the floor, and opened his wrists with a blue and white colored shard. It's getting late now. I've talked with Jenny, told her about Russell. I didn't tell her everything, but I didn't lie. I told her that Russell had cancer. A girl at school got cancer, she told me. Carly Green. She died too. She got leukemia from the power station. The nuclear power station? Jenny smiled. She sounds stupid. She asked me what's going to happen to us. I don't know, I admitted. Are we going to die too? Nah, I said. Not us. Why not? Lots of reasons. Like what? We need power, for one. What else? Well, for a start, Fred's invincible. Second, you're too smart. And third, I'm too pretty. She laughed. You're not pretty. Girls are pretty. Yeah? What am I then? Pretty ugly, she giggled. Thanks. Pretty whiffy, too, she added. And you're not, I suppose? Her face suddenly dropped. Hey, I said, I didn't mean... Yeah, I know. She sniffed and wiped her nose. I felt bad then. Bad for the little things. It's not the big stuff that really gets to you. It's the little things. Things like a cold bathroom, dirty sheets, and little girls who have to put up with smelling bad. Jenny looked up at me. What's going to happen, Linus? Nothing, I lied. We're going to be all right. I've got the others' notebooks. Anya's, Bird's, Russell's. I've been looking around their rooms, too. I waited until Jenny was asleep, and then I went nosing around. It was a bit spooky, and it didn't make me feel too great. But then I didn't feel too great anyway. Anya's notebook is blank. Not a word. Nothing at all. It looks like it's never been opened. I thought that was quite sad at first, having nothing to say, no one to talk to, no secrets, no desire to leave anything behind. But then it struck me that maybe it wasn't such a bad thing after all. I mean, what's so great about sharing your thoughts with someone who doesn't exist? What good does it do? Where does it get you? Nowhere, as far as I can see. Nowhere useful, anyway. Her room had a peculiar smell to it. It smelled exactly how you'd expect a dirty, posh woman's room to smell. A curious mixture of waste and wealth. A bit sweet and a bit sour, like a dead flower. Or like a 50-pound note that's been in a tramp's pocket for a week. Not very nice, but not too bad either. I found some more food in there. There wasn't much. A couple of crackers under the pillow. 4 rashers of cooked bacon hidden in the Bible. A small, furry lump of chocolate under the bed. But it's enough to keep us going for a few more days. The thought of Anya hiding it away didn't make me feel angry anymore. It didn't make me feel anything, to be honest. Bird's room was neater than Anya's. Not clean, but neat. Neat in a scary kind of way, as if he didn't move around much when he was in there. Just lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking scary thoughts. Although it was neater than Anya's room, it smelled a lot worse. It smelled like 50 years of sweat and putrefaction. There were also 1 or 2 signs that Bird had lost it near the end. Urine stains on the wall, dried turds under the bed. I took his notebook and got out of there. The writing in his notebook is really hard to read, all cramped and scrawly, like he was drunk all the time. Apart from the records he kept of our meetings, it's mostly filled with strange little undated notes, each one written on a separate page. I'm not sure what any of it means. For example, 10.59, AII.25, 13.00B, AI 306, movement/time/wasted, Philp Sitar 99273, 7 down, 7 Marlet, 3, fire define line sign wine, useless, law equals devolution, weakness, law weakness, weakness is guarded by law, 152, 1142, Start with 1, 2, 6, 1, 6, 7, 8, 47, end 34. Pictures? Pika, pitika, pice, peace. I left Russell's room until last. I didn't really want to go in there at all. He was dead, but his memory was alive, and I wanted to leave it at that. But something made me go in there. I don't know what it was. Some kind of ghoulish curiosity, I suppose. Something stronger than sentiment. The air smelled thick and coppery, almost salty. And there was a silence to the room that reminded me of the silence of a church. You know, like you're not supposed to be there, like something's watching you. I stood there for a while, just looking around, trying to breathe calmly. It wasn't easy. There were tiny splinters of colored glass scattered on the floor by the bed, shining dully in the light. They looked like blue and white needles. The bed was still bloody, and there were ugly smears on the floor where we dragged the body out. There was other stuff in there, too. Stuff I don't want to talk about. It was all too much. I got his notebook from the cabinet and took it back to my room. I've just finished reading it. Page after page of words and pictures and diagrams. There's all kinds of stuff in there. Thoughts, letters, theories, equations, drawings, even poems. It's incredible. Beautiful, dark, harrowing, complex, and indescribably sad. I'm not going to show you any of it. The last entry is addressed to me. Dear Linus, it begins. The rest is illegible, just a dying scrawl. I'm going to sleep.